I was sorting through my late wife's jewelry when someone knocked urgently on my front door. Through the peephole, I saw Christine Miller, the hospice nurse who had cared for Margaret during her final weeks. I hadn't seen her since the funeral 4 months ago. When I opened the door, her face was pale and tense. "Mr. Walsh, I'm sorry to come unannounced, but I need to show you something before I destroy these files," she said, clutching a manila envelope to her chest. "It's about your nephew Brandon. He's been calling my office, telling people you're mentally unstable. He tried to get me to write false statements saying your wife was concerned about your cognitive decline." My stomach dropped. The October wind suddenly felt colder against my skin. "That's impossible. Margaret never said anything like that." Christine glanced over my shoulder into the house. "Is Brandon home right now?" "He's at the grocery store." "Why?" She handed me the envelope. "Because I think you need to see what he's been planning. And, Mr. Walsh, I think you need to see it before he gets back." I had welcomed Brandon into my home 6 months ago when he lost his job in Seattle. He was my late sister's only son, and family was supposed to help family. That's what Margaret and I had always believed. He was supposed to stay a few weeks while he looked for work in Portland. But after Margaret's cancer took a turn for the worse, Brandon insisted on staying to help me care for her. Now, standing in my doorway at 67 years old, holding an envelope from a woman who looked genuinely frightened, I realized I might have made a terrible mistake. "Come in," I said. Christine followed me to the kitchen table. I had been going through Margaret's things all morning, her jewelry box open in front of me, her pearl necklace still warm in my hand from where I'd been holding it, remembering the day I gave it to her for our 40th anniversary. "I'm required to destroy patient files after a certain period," Christine began, her hands shaking slightly as she opened the envelope. But when I saw what Brandon was doing, I made copies first. "Mr. Walsh, your nephew has been systematically building a case that you're incompetent." She spread several documents across my kitchen table. The first was a letter on official-looking letterhead from something called Senior Care Advocacy Services. It claimed to be an assessment of my mental state, citing incidents of confusion, memory loss, and inability to manage daily tasks. It was dated 3 weeks ago. "I never had any assessment," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know, because I checked with the organization. Mr. Walsh, that company doesn't exist." The next document made my blood run cold. It was a form from Riverside Extended Care Facility, a nursing home across town. The admission was scheduled for next Tuesday, October 15th, 6 days from now. The signature at the bottom was mine, except I had never signed anything. "How did you get these?" I asked. Christine's face flushed. "Brandon brought them to our office 2 weeks ago. He said he needed documentation of your wife's concerns about your mental state to support your admission to assisted living. He offered to pay me $2,000 to write a letter saying Margaret had expressed worries about leaving you alone, and you refused." "Of course I refused. Margaret never said anything like that. She trusted you completely. She told me several times how strong you were, how you were handling everything better than she could have hoped." Christine's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Walsh, your wife was so proud of you. The way you learned to give her medications, how you kept track of her appointments, how you stayed positive even when things got hard. She said you were the most capable man she'd ever known." I had to look away, blinking hard. Margaret's voice in my memory saying those exact words to me one night when I thought I couldn't bear watching her suffer anymore. "But Brandon didn't give up," Christine continued. "When I said no, he got angry. He told me I was interfering with family business. Then last week, he came back with that fake assessment letter, trying to convince me it was real." I looked at the documents again. The nursing home admission form had been filled out completely. Room assignment, medical history, dietary restrictions, all in someone else's handwriting. At the bottom, in a section labeled Financial Responsibility, I saw something that made me grip the edge of the table. Power of attorney. Brandon Michael Walsh. All assets and estate management transferred effective October 1st. "That's yesterday," I said, my voice shaking now. "Mr. Walsh, do you have power of attorney documents?" "No." I never signed anything giving Brandon power of attorney. Christine pulled out her phone. Then these documents are forgeries. Mr. Walsh, I think your nephew is planning to have you committed so he can take control of your estate. The room started spinning. I thought about the past 4 months, how Brandon had been so helpful after Margaret died, insisting on handling the bills, organizing the paperwork, even going through Margaret's personal effects to spare me the pain. How he kept suggesting I was forgetting things, misplacing items, getting confused about dates. How he'd started bringing home brochures for senior living communities and leaving them on the counter. Where is everything? I asked suddenly. Margaret's jewelry, her coin collection, the silver tea set her grandmother gave us. Christine's face went pale. Mr. Walsh, when was the last time you actually saw those things? I stood up, my heart pounding, and went to the china cabinet where we'd always kept the silver tea set. The shelf was empty, except for some random dishes Brandon must have put there. I ran upstairs to our bedroom, Christine following behind me. The jewelry box I'd been sorting through contained only costume jewelry, the cheap pieces Margaret wore for gardening. Her real jewelry, the pieces that had been in her family for generations, were gone. The small safe where we kept our important documents stood open, empty except for some old tax returns. I sat heavily on the bed. It's all gone. Mr. Walsh, I think we need to call the police. But before she could dial, we heard the front door open downstairs. Brandon's voice called out, cheerful and casual. Christine grabbed my arm. Don't tell him I'm here. Not yet. Let's see what he says. We went downstairs together. Brandon was in the kitchen, putting away groceries, whistling softly. He looked up when we entered, and his expression changed instantly. The friendly nephew vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. Christine, he said, his voice flat. What are you doing here? I came to return some of Mrs. Walsh's medical records, she said calmly, though I could feel her hand trembling where she still held my arm. Brandon's eyes moved to the documents spread across the kitchen table. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Uncle Robert, why don't you let Christine and I talk privately? You look tired. Maybe you should go rest. I'm not tired, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. And I want to know about these documents. The nursing home admission. The power of attorney I never signed. Brandon's smile faded. Uncle Robert, we've talked about this. You've been having episodes, forgetting things, getting confused. It's perfectly normal at your age, but you need professional care. I haven't been having episodes. Yes, you have. Last week you couldn't remember where you put Mom's photo album. You thought it was Tuesday when it was actually Wednesday. You asked me 3 times what day the garbage pickup was. Each example was technically true, but meaningless. Normal forgetfulness. The kind everyone experiences. But the way Brandon listed them made them sound sinister, like symptoms of something serious. Those aren't signs of incompetence, Christine said sharply. That's normal life. Brandon turned to her, his expression hardening. This is family business. You should leave. Not until Mr. Walsh knows the truth about what you've been trying to do. What I've been trying to do is take care of my uncle. Something you're being paid to do, by the way. I was paid to take care of his wife. My job ended when she passed. But you've been calling my office, trying to get me to falsify medical records. Brandon's jaw tightened. I never asked you to falsify anything. She never expressed any such concerns. Maybe you forgot. You must see so many patients. The gaslighting was subtle but unmistakable. He was trying to make Christine doubt her own memory, the same way he'd been doing to me for months. Where's Margaret's jewelry? I asked suddenly. The pearls? The diamond earrings? Her mother's wedding ring? Brandon blinked. In the jewelry box upstairs, where they've always been. No. They're not. I've been through it. There's nothing there but costume jewelry. Uncle Robert. We moved those pieces to the safe deposit box at the bank, remember? For security. We did it together last month. I never went to any bank with you. Yes, you did. You were having one of your confused days, but we went together. I have the receipt. I stared at my nephew, this man I'd welcomed into my home, and saw a stranger, worse than a stranger, a predator who had been systematically isolating me, stealing from me, and building a false narrative of my incompetence. Show me the receipt, I said. It's in my room. I'll get it. But as he moved toward the stairs, Christine stepped in front of him. I don't think so. I think we should call the police first. Brandon's pleasant mask finally shattered. You stupid woman. You have no idea what you're interfering with. I know exactly what I'm interfering with. Elderly exploitation, forgery, theft. He's family, Brandon spat. I have every right to protect my uncle's interests. By stealing from him? By forging documents to have him committed? I'm saving him from himself. He's old, he's confused, and he's sitting on almost $1 million that he doesn't need. My mom was supposed to inherit half of this, but she died before Grandma could change the will. This money should be mine. The raw greed in his voice was shocking. This wasn't about concern for my welfare. This wasn't even about opportunity. This was about entitlement. About something Brandon believed he deserved. Your mother had nothing to do with this estate, I said, my voice harder than I'd ever heard it. This was money Margaret and I earned together. Your grandmother left everything to me, and that was her choice. Because you manipulated her. You and Margaret, always playing the perfect couple, making my mom look bad in comparison. Your mother struggled with addiction, Brandon. That wasn't our fault. She struggled because she didn't have the advantages you had. The money, the stability, the perfect little life while we scrambled to survive. Years of resentment poured out of him. I realized this had been building for decades, long before Margaret got sick. I had thought I was helping family when I invited Brandon to stay. Instead, I had given a predator access to everything I owned. Christine already had her phone out. I'm calling the police. Brandon lunged for her phone, but I stepped between them. At 67, I wasn't as strong as I used to be, but rage gave me power I didn't know I had. Don't you touch her, I said. Brandon stared at me, breathing hard. Then he turned and ran for the front door. Let him go, Christine said, her voice shaking. The police will find him, but I knew where he was going. I ran after him. Christine, calling my name behind me. I caught him in the driveway, next to his car. He was pulling a box from the trunk. Margaret's jewelry box. The real one. Still packed with her treasures. Stop, I said. He looked at me with pure hatred. You don't deserve any of this. You're just a pathetic old man waiting to die. Maybe. But this pathetic old man is still smart enough to see what you are. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Christine had called them. Brandon shoved the jewelry box at me hard enough that I stumbled backward. Then he jumped in his car and tore out of the driveway. The police found him 6 hours later at a motel near the airport, trying to pawn Margaret's diamond ring. In his possession, they found over $30,000 in jewelry and collectibles he'd stolen from my house over the past 4 months. They also found the forged power of attorney documents, complete with a practice sheet where he'd been learning to forge my signature. Detective Sarah Okonkwo was a woman about Christine's age with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She sat across from me in my kitchen, the same table where Christine had spread out the evidence just hours earlier. Mr. Walsh, your nephew has been very busy, she said, showing me printouts of bank statements. He opened 3 credit cards in your name, took out a $50,000 home equity loan against this house, and made withdrawals from your savings account, totaling $85,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. How? I never authorized any of that. He had copies of your driver's license, social security card, and other documents. He forged your signature on the loan application and used the fake power of attorney to convince the bank he had authority to access your accounts. I thought about all the times Brandon had offered to help with paperwork, to organize my files, to handle the administrative tasks that seemed overwhelming after Margaret died. He hadn't been helping. He'd been stealing my identity. How much is left? I asked, afraid of the answer. In your primary savings account, About $120,000. The rest is gone. Margaret and I had saved for 45 years. We'd lived modestly, invested carefully, and built an estate worth $850,000. In 4 months, Brandon had stolen almost 20% of it. Can I get it back? Detective Okonkwo's expression softened. We'll try. The jewelry is recoverable, since we caught him with it. The money is more complicated. He spent a lot of it. Cash withdrawals, and online gambling mostly. We'll pursue restitution as part of the criminal case. But realistically, you might not see most of it again. I sat with that information, feeling something inside me break and reform, harder than before. He'll be charged with elder financial abuse, identity theft, forgery, and fraud. Given the amount involved in the premeditation, he's looking at significant prison time if convicted. Probably 8 to 12 years. 8 to 12 years. My sister's son, the little boy I used to take fishing, who called me Uncle Robbie, who Margaret and I had helped through so many difficult times when his mother was using. Mr. Walsh, Detective Okonkwo said gently, I know he's family. This was calculated, systematic exploitation. He targeted you when you were most vulnerable. I know. And I did know. Christine stayed with me that night, worried I shouldn't be alone. We sat in the living room, drinking tea, not saying much. I almost didn't come today. I thought maybe I was overreacting, that it wasn't my place to interfere with family matters. I'm glad you did. Your wife asked me to watch out for you, Christine said quietly. Near the end, when she was too weak to say much, she made me promise. She said you were too trusting, that you always wanted to see the best in people. She was worried someone would take advantage of that. Tears ran down my face, and I didn't try to stop them. She knew. Somehow, she knew. She knew you. And she loved you enough to protect you even after she was gone. The trial took 9 months to complete. Brandon pleaded not guilty, claiming I had given him permission to access my accounts and that I was too confused to remember. His attorney tried to paint me as a senile old man whose memory couldn't be trusted. But Christine's testimony was devastating to his defense. She described in detail how Brandon had tried to bribe her, how he'd shown her forged documents, how his entire story had been a fabrication. The bank representatives testified about the suspicious loan application and credit card requests. The handwriting expert showed how Brandon had practiced forging my signature. Most damaging of all was Brandon's own statement to the detective after his arrest, caught on video. He's old and sitting on money he doesn't need. I have every right to protect my interests. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge looked at Brandon with open disgust. You exploited a grieving widower, a man who welcomed you into his home out of familial loyalty. You didn't just steal his money. You tried to steal his dignity, his independence, his memory of his late wife. The court sentences you to 12 years in state prison. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. But sitting in the courtroom that day was someone I hadn't expected to see. Christine was there, and next to her was a younger woman I recognized from photos in Margaret's hospital room. Sarah, Margaret's niece from Boston, who had flown in to attend the sentencing. Uncle Robert, she said afterward, hugging me tight. You have your own life, your own family. You're my family too. Aunt Margaret made me promise to look after you if anything happened to her, and I let you down. Everyone had promises from Margaret. I realized. She'd been trying to build a safety net around me, knowing I'd need it. 6 months after the sentencing, I stood in my kitchen making coffee, looking out at the garden Margaret and I had planted together. The roses needed pruning. I made a mental note to call Christine's husband, who had offered to help with the yard work. Christine had become a regular visitor, stopping by once a week to check on me. Through her, I'd met a whole community of people who had cared for Margaret, who remembered her kindness and wanted to honor her memory by watching over me. Sarah had moved to Portland with her family. She lived 3 miles away now, and we had dinner together every Sunday. Her kids called me Grandpa Robert. The money Brandon stole was mostly gone. The court ordered restitution, but he had nothing to pay with. I recovered about $35,000 from asset seizures and insurance claims. The rest was just gone. My estate was smaller now, my savings depleted, but I was still comfortable, still independent, still myself. Brandon's attorney had suggested during the trial that I was a bitter old man seeking revenge on family. But he was wrong. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was seeking justice. And more than that, I was seeking the truth. The truth was that Margaret had loved me enough to try to protect me from beyond the grave. The truth was that Christine had risked professional complications to do the right thing. The truth was that I was stronger than I'd believed, capable of fighting back when someone tried to steal not just my money, but my dignity. On Margaret's birthday, I visited her grave with fresh roses from our garden. "You were right," I told her, placing the flowers carefully. "You knew I'd need help. You knew I'd trust the wrong person, but you also knew I'd find my way through with the right people beside me." The wind rustled through the trees, and I could almost hear her voice. "You were always stronger than you believed, Robert. You just needed to remember who you are." I was Robert Walsh. I was 75 years old. I had loved deeply and lost tremendously. I had been betrayed by family and saved by strangers who became friends. I had fought back when someone tried to reduce me to a confused old man who couldn't protect himself. And I had won, not just in court, but in the deeper battle for my own identity and dignity. 6 months later, Christine called with an opportunity. A local senior center needed someone to teach financial literacy classes, helping elderly people recognize signs of financial exploitation. Would I be interested? I thought about everything I'd learned, all the red flags I'd missed with Brandon, all the ways predators targeted vulnerable seniors. "Yes," I said. "I'd be very interested, because the best way to honor what Margaret had tried to do for me was to do it for others. To be the warning voice, the protective presence, the person who saw the danger before it was too late. I couldn't save everyone, but I could try. And that, I realized, was what strength really looked like. In your 70s, not avoiding vulnerability, but using your scars to help others avoid the same wounds. My nephew had tried to make me believe I was too old, too confused, too incompetent to manage my own life. He was wrong. I was exactly who I'd always been. I just had to remember that, through the grief, through the betrayal, through everything that tried to convince me otherwise. And now, teaching those classes every week, seeing recognition in other people's eyes when I described the warning signs, I knew Margaret would be proud. Not just of surviving, but of thriving, of turning pain into purpose. That's what real strength looks like. And that's what real love does. Even after death. It keeps protecting, keeps guiding, keeps reminding you of who you really are when the world tries to convince you otherwise.